In the lively city of Accra, the air was already filled with the buzz of Valentine's Day. Red decorations hung from shop windows, love songs played on radios, and couples moved about the streets, laughing and planning surprises for each other. Among them was Kwame, a man everyone in his neighborhood admired. He was smart, good-looking, and always dressed neatly in his well-pressed shirts and polished shoes. People said he had everything: a good job, a nice house, and a beautiful wife named Amina. Amina had been with Kwame since the days when he had almost nothing. Back then, they shared one small room in a crowded compound. They laughed over small meals and dreamed together about the future. When Kwame got his first job at a logistics company, she was the first person he called. And when they finally moved into their own house, it was Amina who made it a home, painting the walls herself, planting flowers by the gate, and filling the rooms with warmth. But time has a strange way of changing people. Kwame began to rise quickly in his company. He started attending more business events and meeting people he never used to know. That was when he met Linda. She was younger, lively, and always full of compliments. She told Kwame that he inspired her, that she admired his confidence and the way he carried himself. Her laughter was sweet, and her perfume lingered in the air long after she left a room. Kwame liked the way she made him feel important, like a man who could still impress the world. At first, their talks were simple: work, life, music. But soon, Kwame found himself thinking about her even when he was at home. He would scroll through his phone late at night, smiling at her messages while Amina slept beside him. Sometimes, Amina would wake up and ask softly, "Who are you chatting with at this hour?" And he would reply, "Just a client." She believed him. She always believed him. As Valentine's Day drew closer, Amina talked excitedly about spending the evening together. "It's been so long since we had a proper dinner, Kwame," she said one night while cooking jollof rice. "You're always busy. Let's go somewhere nice this year." Kwame nodded distractedly. His mind was elsewhere. He had already made plans, with Linda. She had invited him to a restaurant by the beach, a place known for its soft music and candlelit tables. "Just you and me," she had said with a playful smile. "You deserve something different this year." That night, Kwame lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He knew it was wrong. Amina had given him everything: her time, her loyalty, her trust. But the temptation was strong. Linda was exciting, unpredictable. She made him feel young again, alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. He told himself it would only be one night. One evening to escape responsibility and feel free. The next morning, he rehearsed his lie carefully. Over breakfast, he sighed and said, "Amina, I might have to travel for work this weekend. There's a meeting in Kumasi. It just came up." Amina looked disappointed but tried to smile. "On Valentine's weekend?" "I know," he said quickly, avoiding her eyes. "But it's important for my company. I'll make it up to you when I return." She smiled faintly and touched his hand. "I understand, my love. You work so hard. Be safe on the road." Kwame nodded, pretending to be grateful, but inside he felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. He left the table, straightened his tie, and walked out of the house, leaving behind the smell of breakfast and the soft hum of Amina's favorite love song playing on the radio. Later that day, Amina went to the market, picking out fresh vegetables and some meat for the dinner she would no longer share with her husband. She told herself it didn't matter, that there would be other days. But deep inside, a small ache grew. She had noticed the changes in him, the late nights, the new cologne, the sudden distance in his voice. She didn't want to believe it meant something else. Kwame, meanwhile, spent the afternoon choosing his best outfit. He took extra time to iron his shirt, polished his shoes again, and sprayed a little too much cologne. When he looked in the mirror, he almost didn't recognize the man staring back. He smiled anyway and whispered to himself, "Just one night." By evening, the streets were glowing with lights and music. Couples walked hand in hand, and taxis honked as they passed by. Kwame met Linda at the restaurant as planned. She wore a red dress that shimmered under the lights and smiled as if she had been waiting her whole life for that moment. "Kwame," she said, her voice soft and full of excitement, "you look even better than I imagined." He smiled, feeling his confidence return. "You look beautiful, Linda." They talked, laughed, and shared stories over food and wine. For a few hours, Kwame forgot everything: his home, his wife, his promises. He felt young again, like a man at the start of something new. When Linda laughed and touched his hand, he didn't pull away. He told himself that Amina would never know, that this was harmless. But as the night went on, his mind began to wander. He remembered the first Valentine's Day he spent with Amina years ago, when they could only afford to eat at a small roadside cafe. She had worn a yellow dress and smiled all through the night, proud just to be by his side. He remembered how she had held his hand and said, "We may not have much now, but as long as we have love, we have everything." He tried to push the memory away, but it lingered like a quiet voice in the back of his mind. He looked at Linda across the table, still smiling, still radiant, but suddenly he felt something missing. Her laugh no longer sounded so sweet, her eyes no longer felt so warm. It was as if the music in the restaurant had changed, the light dimmed. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, wondering what Amina was doing at that very moment. Was she watching television alone? Had she eaten dinner? Did she miss him? The thought made his chest tighten. For the rest of the evening, Kwame forced himself to smile, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. He had made his choice, but for the first time, he began to wonder if it was the right one. Outside, the night sky was heavy with clouds. A soft wind blew through the streets of Accra, carrying the smell of rain. Somewhere across town, Amina sat by the window, looking at her phone. She typed a short message, "Travel safe, my love," and sent it. The message went unread. And in that moment, even though they were miles apart, both of them felt the same quiet emptiness that love leaves behind when trust begins to fade. The restaurant was bright with golden lights, filled with the sound of laughter, soft music, and clinking glasses. Kwame and Linda sat at a corner table near the window, where they could see the city glowing under the night sky. Everything around them seemed perfect, the gentle sound of waves from the nearby beach, the smell of good food, the smiles of people celebrating love. It was Valentine's night, and the world looked beautiful. Linda wore a red dress that sparkled under the lights. Her hair was neatly styled, and her perfume carried a sweet scent that lingered in the air. She looked at Kwame with admiration. "You always look so calm," she said with a teasing smile. "Even when you walk into a place, people notice you." Kwame chuckled, pretending to be modest. "Maybe it's just the suit," he said. But inside, her words pleased him. He liked how she made him feel, young, wanted, and important. With Linda, he didn't have to think about responsibility or bills or the tired look in Amina's eyes when he came home late. Tonight, he could forget everything. They ordered food that Amina would never have chosen: grilled seafood, pasta, and wine that cost more than what they used to spend in a week. Linda took pictures of everything, smiling into her phone, her laughter ringing like soft bells. "This night is perfect," she said, holding her glass up. "To us." Kwame raised his glass too. "To us," he repeated, though a small part of him hesitated at the words. As they talked, Linda leaned closer, telling stories about her friends, her dreams, her love for music. Kwame listened, nodding, laughing when she laughed. He found himself enjoying her energy. She was full of life, always smiling, always talking about the next big thing she wanted to do. He admired that about her. She made him feel as though the world still had surprises waiting for him. But while he sat there enjoying the moment, another world existed miles away in a small house in East Legon. Amina was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She had decided to make Kwame's favorite meal, even though he wasn't there. The house was quiet except for the sound of cooking and the soft music playing on the radio. She moved slowly, her heart heavy but calm. When she finished setting the table, she lit a small candle in the center. The flame flickered gently, casting a warm glow over the plates. She smiled to herself, whispering a short prayer. "God, please keep him safe on his trip," she said softly. "Help him finish his work and come home soon." Outside, a few neighbors laughed as they prepared for their own Valentine dinners. The air smelled of roasted meat and perfume. Amina sat down for a moment, looking at the 2 plates on the table. She picked up her phone and scrolled through old photos. Kwame smiling at their wedding, Kwame holding her hand at the beach, Kwame asleep on the couch after a long day. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away and whispered, "He'll come back. He loves me." Back at the restaurant, Kwame and Linda had finished eating. The waiter brought dessert, chocolate cake with strawberries. Linda fed him a small piece and laughed when he pretended to take her hand instead. They looked like any happy couple, lost in the joy of the evening. But deep inside, Kwame began to feel a strange weight. It started as a small thought he tried to ignore. He looked around at the other tables. Men giving roses to their wives, couples laughing together, people holding hands and taking photos. He wondered suddenly what Amina was doing. Was she eating alone? Was she thinking of him? The thought made him shift in his seat. He reached for his glass and took a sip of wine, but it did little to calm his nerves. Linda didn't notice. She kept talking, her eyes shining. "You know," she said, "you should take a break from work more often. You deserve to enjoy yourself. You work too hard." Kwame smiled weakly. "Maybe you're right," he said. But his mind was not in the conversation anymore. He remembered how Amina used to wait up for him when he worked late. She would always greet him with a smile, no matter how tired she was. He remembered the evenings they spent talking about their dreams, sitting under the mango tree behind their old house. He missed those simple times, times when he didn't have to pretend to be someone else. Linda reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "Are you okay?" she asked. Kwame forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired, that's all." She laughed softly. "Then tonight, no stress. You're mine for the evening." The way she said it made him feel both proud and guilty. He looked out the window. The sky had grown darker, and clouds had started to gather. The streetlights below shimmered on the wet pavement. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled quietly. A soft breeze blew through the open window, carrying the smell of rain and sea salt. Kwame sighed. He told himself he should relax, enjoy the night. But the more he tried, the heavier his heart became. He didn't notice when the waiter brought the bill or when Linda started talking about where they could go after dinner. His thoughts were far away, back to the house where Amina might be sitting alone, waiting for a man who wasn't coming home tonight. Amina stood by the window, looking out into the dark sky. The candle on the table had melted halfway. She held her phone and stared at the time. It was almost 10. She thought about calling him but stopped herself. She didn't want to disturb his business trip. Instead, she sent a short message, "Travel safe, my love." Then she placed the phone beside her plate and sat quietly, listening to the rain begin to fall. Each drop that hit the window sounded like a whisper. She closed her eyes and remembered the old days, the laughter, the promises, the love that used to fill their home. She still believed that the man she married was good. Maybe he was just lost for a while. She prayed silently that he would find his way back. At the restaurant, the waiter returned with their coats. The rain outside had grown stronger. People rushed out with umbrellas, their laughter echoing through the wet air. Kwame stood up, helping Linda with her jacket, but his mind was elsewhere. As they stepped outside, he looked at the sky. Lightning flashed far away, bright for a second, then gone. He felt a chill run through him that wasn't from the rain. It was something else, something inside. For a moment, he saw Amina's face in his mind, her smile, her soft eyes, her quiet strength. He wondered if she was thinking of him too. He wanted to call her, to hear her voice, but pride stopped him. Linda pulled his arm playfully. "Come on, let's not get soaked," she said, laughing as they ran toward her car. Kwame smiled faintly but didn't say a word. As they drove away, he looked out the window, watching the rain hit the glass. The lights of the city blurred into streaks of red and gold. Somewhere deep in his heart, he felt a storm rising, quiet but strong, waiting to break. And while the rain poured over Accra, washing the streets clean, it could not wash away the guilt that had begun to grow in Kwame's soul. The waiter had just placed 2 small plates of chocolate cake on the table when Kwame's phone began to ring. The screen lit up with the name Kojo. Kwame hesitated for a moment, then answered. He could barely hear his friend's voice over the noise in the restaurant, but the tone was urgent, frightened. "Kwame, are you home?" Kojo shouted. "There's been an accident near your house. I heard there was a fire. Bro, is Amina safe?" Kwame froze. His fork slipped from his hand and hit the plate with a sharp sound. The people at the nearby tables turned to look at him. For a second, he couldn't speak. His chest tightened, and his heart began to pound so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. What did you say?" he stammered. "Fire," Kojo said again. "I don't have all the details, but it started close to your street. I saw a video online. Your area looks bad. Call Amina now." The line crackled and went dead. Kwame stood up so quickly that his chair fell backward. The sound echoed through the restaurant. Linda looked up, surprised. "What happened?" she asked. He didn't answer. His hands shook as he grabbed his coat. The only words he could say were, "There's a fire near my house." Then he rushed out, leaving Linda sitting there in confusion, her mouth slightly open. The rain outside had turned heavy, falling in thick sheets that blurred the streetlights. Kwame ran into it without caring. His heart felt like it was being squeezed. All the laughter and warmth of the evening disappeared in an instant. The world around him felt cold, dark, and loud. He tried calling Amina again and again, but the line wouldn't go through. Every time it rang and stopped, his fear grew stronger. He dashed into the street, waving for a taxi, but none stopped. They were all full or speeding past to escape the rain. He kept running, water soaking his shoes, his shirt sticking to his skin. People looked at him as he passed, a man in a fine suit running like someone chased by ghosts. He finally found a driver willing to stop. The man looked at him with concern. "Boss, where you day go this night under this kind rain?" "East Legon." "Fast, please," Kwame said breathlessly, jumping in. The car sped off. Raindrops hit the windshield so hard that the wipers could barely keep up. The city lights smeared into long lines of red and white. Kwame sat in silence, staring out the window, his mind spinning. He kept seeing Amina's face, the way she smiled at him in the morning, the way she touched his hand at breakfast, her soft voice saying, "Be safe on the road." He thought of all the times he had ignored her messages, all the nights he had come home late with excuses. He remembered the hope in her eyes when she asked if they could have dinner together this Valentine's Day. He had said he was too busy. And now, maybe, he had lost his chance forever. "Boss, you sure say you okay?" the driver asked as he turned onto the main road. Kwame didn't answer. He was staring at his phone, trying Amina's number again. Still no answer. He sent a message, "Amina, please pick up. I'm on my way." The driver slowed down when they reached the neighborhood. The sky glowed faintly orange ahead. People were gathered at the end of the street, shouting and pointing. The smell of smoke filled the air. Kwame jumped out before the car stopped moving, running through puddles toward the noise. The closer he got, the clearer the scene became. A small house nearby was burning, flames climbing up the walls. Neighbors were using buckets of water, shouting, trying to help. Fire trucks were parked by the roadside, their sirens loud and sharp. Kwame's throat went dry. He pushed through the crowd, calling out, "Amina! Amina!" His voice broke with fear. He felt dizzy, weak, as if the ground under him might open up. One of the neighbors recognized him. "Kwame, your wife is okay," she shouted. "It's your neighbor's house that caught fire. The generator exploded. But Amina's fine. She's down the street." Kwame stopped. The relief hit him so suddenly that his knees almost gave way. He ran in the direction she pointed, his shoes splashing in the water. He saw her standing by a wall, wrapped in a shawl. Her face was pale, but she was calm, speaking softly with another neighbor. When she saw him running toward her, she looked surprised. "Kwame," she said quietly. He stopped in front of her, breathing hard, his hair soaked, his clothes dripping. "Amina," he said, his voice trembling. Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "I'm fine." The fire was next door. It didn't reach our house. He exhaled deeply and covered his face with his hands. "Thank God," he whispered. "Thank God." For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The rain continued to fall, washing away the smoke that hung in the air. Amina's eyes softened as she looked at him, this man who looked lost and broken in the rain. "You came home early," she said quietly. "I thought you were in Kumasi." Kwame couldn't meet her eyes. He swallowed hard, trying to find the right words, but none came. His voice was small when he finally spoke. "I heard there was a fire. I couldn't stay away. I had to make sure you were safe. She nodded slowly. That was kind of you, she said. Her tone was gentle, but there was something in it, something that told him she knew more than she was saying. The fire trucks began to leave. People started walking back to their homes, murmuring about how lucky it was that no one got hurt. The rain softened to a drizzle. Amina turned to go back inside. You should come in and change, she said simply. You'll catch a cold in this rain. Kwame followed her silently. Inside, the house was dim and smelled faintly of smoke. A candle burned on the table, its small flame still steady. The dinner she had made was cold now, untouched. 2 plates. 2 glasses. He looked at them and felt his chest tighten again. Amina disappeared into the bedroom and came back with a towel. She handed it to him. Here, she said softly. You look tired. Kwame took it but didn't move. Amina, he said, his voice shaking. I'm sorry. She looked at him, her eyes calm but unreadable. Why are you sorry? He opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. How could he explain the lies, the dinner, the reason he wasn't really in Kumasi? He wanted to confess everything, to fall on his knees and beg her forgiveness. But the weight of shame was too heavy. She watched him quietly for a moment, then turned toward the window. Kojo called earlier, she said softly. He told me you were worried. That's why you came rushing home. Kwame nodded slowly. Yes. Yes, I couldn't stay away. Amina smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. I'm glad you care, she said. It's good to know I still mean something to you. He wanted to tell her that she meant everything, that she always had, but the words wouldn't come. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. The rain had almost stopped. The candle flickered once, then went out, leaving the room in shadows. Kwame stood there, still dripping, staring at the dark window. His reflection looked back at him, a man who had nearly lost everything, not to fire, but to his own choices. And as the night grew quiet again, he finally understood that sometimes the most dangerous flames are not the ones that burn houses, but the ones that burn within the heart. Kwame stood still, his body heavy with rain and guilt. The fire trucks were gone, and only the smell of smoke lingered in the air. The street was quiet now, except for the sound of water dripping from the roofs and the soft voices of neighbors cleaning up the mess the fire had left behind. Amina stood a few steps away, wrapped in a brown shawl, her face calm but tired. The rain had stopped, but she didn't move to go inside. She just stood there, staring at the ground, lost in thought. When Kwame saw her, his heart clenched again. He had never been so afraid in his life, not of losing his house, not of losing money, but of losing her. He walked toward her slowly, as if his legs no longer obeyed him. Amina, he said softly. His voice shook. Are you all right? She looked up, her eyes meeting his. They were not angry, not even sad, just distant, like she was looking at someone she no longer recognized. I'm fine, she said quietly. It was our neighbor's generator. It caught fire, not our house. He let out a long breath of relief, closing his eyes for a moment. Thank God, he whispered. But when he opened his eyes again, she was still watching him, her face unreadable. There was a silence between them, heavy and deep. The kind of silence that said everything words could not. After a while, she spoke again. Kwame, she said slowly, I know you weren't on a business trip. His head jerked up. What? She sighed softly and looked away. Someone sent me a picture, she continued. A picture of you and Linda. You were at a restaurant tonight. You were smiling. Kwame's mouth went dry. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His mind went blank. He felt exposed, caught completely off guard. Amina! He started, but she raised her hand gently. Don't lie, she said softly, almost kindly. Please. I've had enough lies. Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit him harder than any shout could have. He lowered his eyes, unable to look at her. The truth hung between them like a shadow, impossible to ignore. She looked up at the sky, then back at him. Do you know, she said, her tone calm but sad, I sat in this house tonight and prayed for your safety. I lit a candle and cooked your favorite meal. I told myself you were working hard for us. And all that time, you were somewhere else, with her. Kwame wanted to speak, to explain, to defend himself, but there was nothing he could say that would make it right. The rain had stopped, but his heart still felt like it was drowning. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said finally, his voice trembling. It just happened. I didn't plan it. Amina nodded slowly. That's how it always starts, isn't it? Things just happen. One message becomes two. One dinner becomes a secret. And before you know it, love becomes a lie. Her calmness scared him more than anger ever could. He wished she would shout at him, cry, throw something, anything but this quiet voice that sounded like goodbye. I'm sorry, he whispered. Please, Amina. I made a mistake. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I know you did. But the worst part isn't the mistake, Kwame. It's that you chose it. You chose her. You chose to lie to me. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. It was one night, he said, his voice small. It meant nothing. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. It meant something, she said quietly. Because while you were choosing your nothing, I was here choosing you. Kwame felt a sharp pain in his chest, the kind that comes when regret is too deep for words. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand, but she pulled back gently. Don't, she said softly. Please don't touch me. Not tonight. He dropped his hand and looked down, ashamed. The streetlight flickered above them, casting long shadows on the wet ground. The faint smell of burnt rubber still filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Everything felt strange, too real and too quiet at the same time. Amina finally sighed and turned toward the house. You should go inside and change, she said. You'll get sick standing here. He followed her in silence, every step feeling heavier than the last. Inside, the house was dim. The candle on the table had burned almost to the end. The plates she had set earlier were still there, the food cold. The smell of stew mixed with the faint scent of smoke from outside. Amina looked at the table for a moment, then smiled sadly. I made your favorite, she said softly. Goat stew. I waited for you. But I guess you had a better meal. Kwame's stomach twisted. Amina, please, don't say that. I was stupid. I didn't think. She nodded. You didn't think about me. You didn't think about us. She sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. Do you know why I didn't call you tonight? Because I wanted to see who you'd choose when no one was watching. Her words landed like a weight on his chest. He couldn't speak. He could only stand there, staring at the floor, ashamed of what he had become. Amina's voice softened even more. I wasn't going to confront you, Kwame. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just a rumor. But when I saw that picture, I stopped pretending. You were sitting across from her, smiling, just like you used to smile at me. Kwame looked up slowly, his eyes full of regret. It didn't mean what it looked like, he whispered. I swear, it was just a mistake. Amina shook her head gently. Mistakes don't happen when you have to plan them, she said. You dressed up. You lied about a trip. You chose a place. That's not a mistake, Kwame. That's a choice. He felt his legs weaken. He pulled out a chair and sat down, burying his face in his hands. I don't know what came over me, he said, his voice muffled. I thought I needed excitement. I thought I was missing something. Amina looked at him quietly. And did you find it? She asked. He didn't answer. She sighed, her voice full of sadness. You know, love is not about excitement. It's about choosing the same person again and again, even when life becomes ordinary. But you stopped choosing me. Kwame finally looked up, tears in his eyes. Can you forgive me? Amina didn't answer right away. She looked at the cold meal on the table, the candle almost out, and the man she had loved for so long sitting there looking lost. I don't know, she said softly. Forgiveness takes time. Right now, I just need to remember how to breathe again. She stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the last drops of rain sparkled under the streetlight. I'm glad you came running home tonight, she said without turning around. It shows that somewhere inside you, there's still something good. I just hope you find it again before it's too late." Kwame sat in silence, staring at her back. He wanted to speak, to promise he would change, to tell her he loved her. But the words caught in his throat. Amina turned slightly, her eyes meeting his one last time. "Good night, Kwame," she said gently. "You can sleep here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll talk. Or maybe we won't." Then she walked away, leaving him sitting alone at the table. The candle flickered once more before going out completely, and the house fell into darkness. Kwame sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet. He could still smell the smoke outside, the faint reminder of what could have been lost. But deeper than that was another fire, one burning inside him now. The fire of guilt, regret, and the painful truth that he had brought this all upon himself. He looked at the empty chair across from him, where Amina had been sitting earlier, and whispered to the silence, "I chose wrong." And for the first time that night, he let his tears fall freely. Weeks had passed since that night, and everything around Kwame seemed quieter. The house that once felt full of life now felt like an empty shell. The laughter that used to fill the rooms was gone. The scent of Amina's cooking no longer drifted through the air. Even the flowers she had planted by the window had begun to wither without her care. Amina had moved out a few days after their confrontation. She didn't shout or argue when she left. She simply packed her things, her clothes, her favorite books, the framed wedding photo on the table, and said she was going to stay with her sister for a while. She told Kwame to take care of himself, and then she was gone. Kwame watched her taxi drive away, his chest heavy. He wanted to run after her, to beg her to stay, but something inside him told him it was too late. So he just stood there, his hands trembling, watching the car disappear down the street. At first, he told himself it was just temporary. He thought Amina only needed time to cool off, that she would come back soon. But days turned into weeks, and the silence grew heavier. Every morning, he woke up expecting to hear her voice, but all he heard was the sound of the ceiling fan spinning lazily above him. He tried calling her a few times, but she rarely answered. When she did, her voice was polite but distant, like she was talking to a stranger. She didn't ask how he was doing, and she didn't tell him much about her day. Eventually, he stopped calling altogether because each unanswered call felt like another piece of him breaking. Linda, too, had stopped calling. The night after the fire, she had tried to reach him, but he didn't answer. After that, she sent one short message, "I hope everything is okay." He never replied. A week later, her number stopped appearing on his phone. He knew she had moved on, probably with someone else. Now, Kwame spent his evenings sitting alone in the living room, staring at the empty chair across from him, the one where Amina used to sit while they talked about their day. The television played quietly in the background, but he rarely paid attention to it. His mind was always somewhere else, wandering through memories he wished he could erase or relive differently. He remembered the early years of their marriage, how Amina would save part of her small salary to surprise him with gifts, even when they barely had enough for themselves. He remembered the way she used to wait up for him, no matter how late he came home, with a smile and a warm meal. He remembered how proud she had been when they bought this house, the one that now felt so lifeless. Every corner of the house reminded him of her. The painting on the wall, the cushion she loved, the small crack on the kitchen tile that she used to complain about, all of it whispered her name. At work, people noticed the change in him. His colleagues said he looked tired, distracted. He stopped going out to lunch with them, preferring to stay in his office. Even Kojo, his best friend, tried to cheer him up, but nothing worked. "Kwame," Kojo said one afternoon, "you're not yourself anymore. What's going on?" Kwame just smiled weakly. "I made a mistake, Kojo. A big one." Kojo looked at him for a moment, then sighed. "Then fix it before it's too late." Kwame shook his head. "Some things can't be fixed." That night, he went home and sat on the couch, staring at his phone. He opened Amina's contact, his thumb hovering over the call button. But he couldn't bring himself to press it. What would he say? That he missed her? That he was sorry? He had already said those words, and they hadn't been enough. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The house was quiet, too quiet. Outside, he could hear the sound of crickets and distant traffic. It reminded him of the nights when Amina would hum softly while folding laundry, her voice blending with the night sounds. He wished he could go back, just once, to a time when things were simple and full of love. Days passed slowly. He went to work, came home, ate dinner alone, and went to bed. But sleep rarely came easily. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night, thinking he heard Amina's voice. He would rush to the living room, only to find it empty. One Saturday morning, he drove past the beach where he had taken Linda on Valentine's night. The restaurant still stood there, filled with couples laughing and holding hands. Kwame parked his car nearby and watched from a distance. He felt an ache deep in his chest. He remembered the candlelight, the laughter, the false sense of freedom he had felt that night. Now, it all seemed meaningless. He thought about how quickly things had fallen apart, how one choice, one selfish moment, had destroyed years of love and trust. He had always believed that life gave second chances, but now he wasn't so sure. Some choices, he realized, couldn't be undone. When he got home that evening, he went to the small garden behind the house. The flowers Amina had planted were nearly dead, their petals dry and brown. He knelt down and began to water them slowly. As he did, he whispered to himself, "I'm sorry." He wasn't sure who he was apologizing to, Amina, God, or himself, but the words came from deep inside. He spent more time outside after that, tending to the garden every evening. It became his way of thinking, of healing. Slowly, green began to return to the plants, and new buds started to grow. It gave him a small sense of hope, even if Amina never came back. The days turned into months. Valentine's Day came again, and the city was once more filled with red decorations and love songs. Kwame walked through the market, watching people buy flowers and gifts. He saw men smiling as they held bouquets, women laughing as they picked out dresses. It reminded him of how happy he used to be on days like this. He went into a flower shop and bought a single red rose. The woman at the counter smiled and said, "For someone special?" Kwame hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "Someone very special." He drove home with the rose resting on the seat beside him. When he got inside, he placed it on the dining table, the same table where Amina had once lit a candle for him. He sat down and stared at it for a long time. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. He imagined Amina sitting across from him again, smiling gently the way she used to. He could almost hear her voice saying, "You just have to choose right, Kwame." He reached for the rose, held it in his hand, and whispered, "Some choices can't be undone." Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. They fell onto the table, one by one, mixing with the drops of water that had fallen from the rose. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. For the first time in months, Kwame closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The air felt cool and calm. He knew he couldn't change the past, but maybe he could learn from it. Maybe, one day, he would find peace, not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from finally understanding. And as the evening light faded, Kwame sat there in the quiet house, the rose still in his hand, whispering to himself again and again, "Some choices can't be undone."